Today we're going to learn about subtracting integers. Just a quick reminder, yellow is a positive, red is a negative. So let's look at our first problem. We have positive 3, and we want to take away 2 positive counters. Do we have 2 positives to take away? We do. So when we take away 2 positive counters, we have 1 positive counter left. So 3 positives take away 2 positives equals 1 positive. Let's look at a similar problem. We have 3 negatives. And I'm going to take away 2 negatives. Do I have 2 negatives to take away? I do. So when I have 3 negatives and I'm going to take away 2 negatives, I am left with 1 negative. So -3 counters take away -2 counters leaves me with -1 counter. Let's look at our next problem. So I have positive 3, and I need to take away -2 counters. Well, there aren't 2 negative counters for me to take away. So I need to add 0 pairs until I get to 2 negative counters. So here's 1 0 pair. That gives me 1 negative counter. And here are 2 0 pairs. I now have 2 negative counters that I can take away. So when I take away 2 negative counters, I am left with 5 positives. So I started with 3 positives, and then I needed to take away 2 negative counters. I didn't have 2 negatives, so I added 2 0 pairs to give me 2 negatives to take away. And then I took away the 2 negatives, and that left me with 5 positive counters. Let's look at one that's similar to that. I'm going to start with -3 counters. And I need to take away +2 counters. I do not have 2 positive counters to take away, so I need to add 0 pairs until I have 2 positives. Here's my first 0 pair. That gives me 1 positive to take away. I need 2 positives. So I add a second 0 pair, and now I have 2 positives I can take away. When I take away my 2 positives, I am left with 5 negatives. So to recap that, I started with 3 negatives. I needed to take away 2 positives. I did not have that, so I added 2 0 pairs. I then had 2 positives that I could take away, and my result of -3 take away +2 is -5. Let's look at another one. So I'm going to start with 2 positives. I need to take away 3 positives. I don't have 3 positives to take away, so I need to add a 0 pair until I have 3 positives. I add 1 0 pair. I now have 3 positives to take away. So I take away my 3 positives, and I'm left with 1 negative. I'm left with 1 negative. So to recap, I started with 2 positives. I needed to take away 3 positives. I did not have 3, so I added 1 0 pair. and I could take away my 3 positives, leaving me with 1 negative. I also want to show you an alternate to that. I start with positive 2. I need 3 positives to take away. So I need to add 3 0 pairs. I add 1 0 pair, 2 0 pairs, and 3 0 pairs. This method, for me, helps the kids know that I add the opposite of the second number every time, and that cements it a little bit better for my kids. So I have positive 3. Now I can take away positive 3, and when I do, I'm left with 2 positives and 3 negatives. Now I cancel out my 0 pairs, and I'm left with negative 1. So there's 2 ways to do that same problem. You can choose which is best for your students and for you as a teacher. So 2 take away positive 3 was negative 1. Let's look at a similar one. I have positive 2, and I need to take away 3 negatives. I don't have 3 negatives to take away. So I need to add 0 pairs until I get enough negatives to remove. So I have 1 0 pair, 2 0 pairs, that gives me 2 negatives, and 3 0 pairs. I now have 3 negatives I can take away. When I take away those 3 negatives, I am left with 5 positives. So I started with 2 positives, and I needed to take away 3 negatives. I didn't have any, so I added 1, 2, 3 0 pairs. Now I had 3 negatives that I could remove. I took those away, and I was left with 5 positives. Let's do one more, our last one. I have 2 negatives, and I need to take away 3 negatives. I don't have 3 negatives to take away, so I need to add 0 pairs until I have 3 negatives to take away. I added 1 0 pair, and that left me with 3 negatives. I now have 3 negatives I can take away, and when I take away my 3 negatives, I'm left with 1 positive. To recap this way, I have 2 negatives. I needed 3 negatives to take away. I added 1 0 pair to get me the 3 negatives. I took my 3 negatives away, and I have 1 positive. Here's an alternate way for this one as well. I start with my 2 negatives. I need 3 negatives to take away. I don't have 3, so I'm going to add 3 0 pairs. 1, 2, 3. 3 0 pairs. I'm going to remove my 3 negatives and then cancel any 0 pairs that I may have remaining. I have 2 0 pairs remaining, and that leaves me with 1 positive. So let's recap that real fast. Started with 2 negatives. I added 3 0 pairs. Because this is a 3, I need to remove 3 negatives. I need to remove my 0 pairs. And I'm left with 1 positive.